We are amazed at what Ash-Shafibi has said, who pointed out the similarities between the Rawafid Shia and Jewish ideas. He said in the presence of Malik ibn Muawiyah, "Beware of the Rawafid, followers of misguided passions, for their evil is the same as that of the Jews. They are the Jews of the Muslims. They hate Islam as much as the Jews hate the Christians. They did not enter Islam out of hope and fear of Allah, but they entered Islam only to make trouble and commit treason." Remember, Caliph Ali ibn Talib, may Allah be pleased with him, burned them with fire and exiled them from their lands. Abdullah bin Sabah was banished to Sabath, while Abdullah bin Sabab was exiled to Hazar, for both of them loved Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, the way the Jews loved him. The Rawafid also said, "No one is fit to be caliph except the imams of the al-Bayt and the descendants of Ali." The Jews said, "No one is fit to be caliph except the imams of the al-Bayt and the descendants of Ali." The Jews say, "There is no jihad until the Messiah al-Mawud comes out and the call is heard from the sky." Similarly, the Rawafid Shiites say, "There is no jihad until the Mahdi appears and the cause descends from the sky." The Jews delay the Maghrib prayer until the stars are clearly visible, and the same is true of the Rawafid Shia. In matters of divorce, the Jews do not consider the relationship between husband and wife to be severed with the third divorce, nor do the Rawafid Shia. The Jews do not enforce Ida, legalize the blood of Muslims, and change the contents of the Book of Allah. The Rafid Shia also do the same thing as the Jews. The Jews hate Gabriel alayhi salam so much, and so do the Rafid Shiites, that they say, Gabriel was wrong in sending down the revelation to Muhammad by leaving Ali ibn Abi Talib. The Jews do not allow eating camel meat, and neither do the Shias. There is one advantage of the Jews and Christians over the Rawafid Shiites. If the Jews were asked, "Who are the most honorable people in your eyes?" they would undoubtedly answer, "The Hawari Izapare." However, if you ask the Rawafid Shiites, you will be surprised to hear the answer to the question, "Who are the worst people in your eyes?" You will undoubtedly hear the answer, "The worst people are the companions of Muhammad, Lunu Abdi Rabu, al-Ilqid, al-Farawid, Jil. 2, p. 104. This is an explanation that shows how wide the scope of this hadith is, and how synchronized its content is with the condition of Muslims today. This case of following the Jews and Christians in their various systems and teachings has not only afflicted some Muslims, but has even begun to cover all circles of the Ummah as a whole and in all aspects of life. The facts on the ground that are visible today indeed reinforce this. Massive and blatant blind allegiance to all things Western has begun to ravage the majority of Muslim households, from the smallest to the largest. The market, the education curriculum from primary to tertiary levels, entertainment, fashion, and parties are all westernized. And this is what we are feeling today, and there is no power and no effort except with the help of Allah, the Most High, the Most Glorious. Abu Waqid al-Laythi narrated the following: when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam went out to Hunan, he passed by a tree belonging to the polytheists, on which they hung their weapons, known as Jatu Anwath. The companions said to him, "O Messenger of Allah, make for us another Jata Anwath, as they have this Jatu Anwath." He replied, "Subhanallah, this request is like the words of the people of Moses, who said, 'Make for us a god like their gods.' Know by the one in whose hand my soul is, that you will do the ways of those who were before you." At Tirmidhi, Al-Fitan, Hadith No. 2271. He stated that this hadith is Hasan Sahih. Explanation: it is clear from the hadith that the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, warned his ummah against following the behavior of those who came before them, and that there is a similarity between the request made by the companions and the people of Musa alayhi salam. The similarity lies in the interest of these two people to follow the behavior of those who came before them and those around them. On the other hand, they also felt honored and flattered by imitating the people before them. As for the requests made, there is a very clear difference. The children of Israel openly asked Musa alayhi salam to make or appoint another god for them, like the polytheists. That is, they were clearly asking for disbelief. The companions of Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, on the other hand, were simply asking for a tree such as Jada Anwath to hang their weapons on, just as the polytheists had hung their swords on it. In fact, the request made by the companions did not concern matters of faith at all, or at least did not reduce the level of faith at all, not like the request of the children of Israel. Such a request can essentially be understood in the context of today, and can be applied in various issues. However, we find that the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, denied his companions on this issue. Although many people remain steadfast in their faith, they also follow the ways of the Jews and Christians in certain matters. Indeed, the request of the companions was much different, both in terms of substance and form, but the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, still did not grant this request, and even warned his ummah not to imitate them. One might ask, why did the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, compare the request of the companions to the shirk practiced by the children of Israel? What is wrong if the companions also had a particular tree to hang their weapons on? And what is wrong if we today can benefit from whatever comes from the West, which will also make our lives easier? Answer: in fact, the prohibition emphasized by the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, was not limited to hanging weapons on a particular tree. Thus, we are not prohibited from taking lessons from outside for the sake of civilization. But what the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, was trying to achieve goes far beyond that. The Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, forbade his followers from imitating the disbelievers around them, while they were still in the process of receiving religious teachings directly from him, both with regard to the affairs of this world and the hereafter. If such a request had been granted, it would have been contrary to the pure values of the religious teachings that were being transferred to the companions at that time. On the other hand, this method was also expected, so that when the transformation of teachings was taking place, the unity of the method and the purity of the teachings could be maintained from various bad infiltrations that came from outside. As for hanging swords on the branches of trees, this is not forbidden. In fact, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, did it himself, as was the case in the Battle of Jat Arika. This is very different from the idea that if something happens repeatedly, has its own name, and then becomes a tradition for a certain people, so that just by looking at their behavior or habits, one can easily guess that the people who carry out this tradition are from this people or that people. We should conclude from the example given in the hadith that anything that indicates a way of thinking or behavior that can be easily attributed to the Jews and Christians should not be imitated, even if the action or way of thinking is permissible in principle. Thus, all of these hadiths point to the Prophet's peace and blessings of Allah be upon him emphasis on disobeying the Jews and Christians. Khalifa Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, also emphasized this when he appointed companions to be qadis or governors in conquered areas. Among his famous wills, he once advised the Muslims who settled in Persia as follows: do not live in pleasure, dress like the polytheists, and wear silk. Muslim, Al-Libas, Hadith, No. 2069. Dressing up is permissible in principle, but if it is done in order to resemble a particular people, then that is what makes it haram, because it is the resemblance that makes it haram. With regard to anything that relates to the material works of other nations, anything that has nothing to do with their way of thinking and behavior, or anything that they have in common with them, its use falls within the scope of permissible, obligatory, or sunnah, depending on the needs of the people. Conclusion: this hadith can be said to be the basic foundation for the necessity of unity of method in order to accept revelation as the only manhaj in life. On the other hand, this hadith is also a prohibition for Muslims to adopt the mindset of other people. More specifically, the people of the book, even if what is imitated is not at all related to matters of faith. Zubair ibn Awam radiyallahu anhu reported that the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, "A disease has spread among you which has afflicted the nations before you, viz., envy and enmity. They are both things that cut. I do not mean hair, but they will cut your religion. By the one in whose hand my soul is, you will not enter paradise until you truly believe, and you will not believe correctly until you love one another. Do you want me to show you something that strengthens the unity among you? Spread the greeting of peace among yourselves." Hr. At-Tirmidhi Shifa al-Qiyamah, Hadith number 2628. Explanation: the above hadith indicates that various spiritual diseases will spread among Muslims, because of which the previous nations, such as the Jews and Christians and others, perished. Of course, the spread of these diseases is due to their love of the world and the race to attain it. The Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, has also explained the cure for many spiritual diseases, which is the spread of mutual love among individuals among the people, and strengthening it in a concrete form by spreading the greeting of peace among them. In addition, the above hadith is one of the many proofs of the prophecy of the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and what has happened to this ummah is proof of its truth. The above hadith is also corroborated by another hadith, which indicates that the Muslim ummah will follow the behavior of the previous nations, which in the hadith below is more focused on the psychological illness that led to the destruction of the ummah. Anas ibn Malik, may Allah be pleased with him, reported, "The Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, O Messenger of Allah, when will we give up telling each other to do good and forbid evil?" He replied, "When there arises among you the kind of thing that arose at the time of the children of Israel. That is, moral corruption is practiced by the old, the government is held by the young, and knowledge is in the hands of the lowly." Ibn Majah, Al-Fitan, Hadith No. 4015. This hadith has been explained before, but we mention it here to explain the natural connection between the illness of Muslims and the previous ummah. 2. The rise of heretical sects. Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, reported that the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The Jews will be divided into 71 or 72 groups, the Christians also, while the Muslims will be divided into 73 groups." Abu Dawud, As-Sunnah, Hadith No. 4572. In another narration it is stated, the companions asked, "Who are the survivors, O Messenger of Allah?" He replied, "Those who remain with me and my companions." At-Tirmidhi Al-Iman, Hadith No. 2779. He stated that this hadith Hazan Lalapi Garib. Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan radiyallahu anhu reported the following: "Recall that the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, stood among us and said, the people of the book before you were divided into 72 groups, and this religion Islam will be divided into 73 groups, 72 of which will go to hell, and only one will go to paradise. That group is called the congregation." Ibn Yahya and Amr added to this narration with the words, "And there will indeed come out of my ummah some people who will indulge in their lusts to create sex, like a rabid dog that attacks its owner." Amr said, "The disease of a rabid dog does not leave the blood vessels and joints. Rather, it spreads throughout the body." Ash-Shahi al-Musnad, p. 66. Explanation: firstly, The aforementioned hadiths and their narrations indicate that the Muslim Ummah will be divided, just as the Jews and Christians were divided into several groups. In fact, the Muslims are one group more than the two previous groups. And this one group will get help and always stand on the truth until the day of judgment arrives, as explained by several hadiths. Secondly, if you look at this hadith, it is consistent with the hadiths that show the Muslims' indifference to the customs of the nations that came before them. This means that as long as Muslims indulge in what the Jews and Christians have done, whether in major or minor matters, the disaster of division that has befallen these two communities will also befall Muslims in the same way that it has befallen these two communities. In other words, if the schism that occurred within the Jewish and Christian communities resulted in God's wrath, so that they were all put into hell, then the same result will also be felt by Muslims if they follow the schism. However, among these groups, there is still one group that is saved, namely, those who follow the religion of Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, which is referred to in the hadith as ma'ana Allahi wa ashhabi and wa hum al-gharaba, as will be explained later. Third, the schism referred to in the context of this hadith is a schism based on a wrong understanding of the main teachings of Islam, and which has been determined by Kathi arguments, which, if this is denied, results in someone becoming a disbeliever or apostate.